Which CS player do you think has been the best in the past few years? We're thinking you'd probably say either Simple or ZywOo. Some would maybe even say Nico or Rops. But what about Device? Can he be called the best of the best? Likely not. In the end, the Dane himself admits that he isn't the best player, that title has to go to Sasha Simple. But here's the paradox. Simple has said on multiple occasions that he would trade all of his HLTV medals to win more majors with Na'Vi, and Device has 4 of them, in case you forgot. I mean, there's plenty of great things to say about the Dane. He held the record for the most MVP medals for a very long time, and was also in the top 5 best players for 6 years in a row. Device definitely deserved his place in the esports Hall of Fame, but it just so happened that very recently, Nicolai's career nearly fell apart. He ended up in a place where many esports players could never get themselves back from, but somehow he managed to pull through, despite the fact that so many circumstances were not in his favor. For instance, Device broke up with his beloved girlfriend, the team he really believed in didn't live up to his expectations, his health worsened so much that he felt like his body wasn't even listening to him anymore, and panic attacks made it difficult to even get any sleep at night. Don't forget to like and subscribe, because you're watching CYBERSHOKE, and today we'll tell you how Device nearly lost his whole career and what helped him come back to the Tier 1 scene. It's important to understand that for a very long time, Device was considered one of the best players in the world. The Dane was called Mr. Stability, and he, winning one tournament after another, wasn't particularly upset that he didn't get HLTV's #1 title once again. Throughout his career, Device has had one massive issue. His body is very fragile and often let him down. One of his diagnoses is irritable bowel syndrome, an incurable disease that brings a lot of discomfort to life and gets even worse during stress. Few people know this, but in his childhood, Device actually was dreaming of becoming a professional badminton player, but was forced to abandon his plans due to health problems. Later, when he got into CS, he was happy that at least he was able to have some form of competition in his life. Device quickly got used to the fact that at LAN tournaments, he felt horrible almost every day. He accepted that his disease is incurable and just tolerated it. Over the years of playing in Astralis, he only took a single break for a couple of tournaments. Unfortunately, the Dane's schedule was getting tighter. Esports had developed, there were more tournaments, and Astralis' era would cause them to receive invitations to all of the biggest championships. And as a result, they became the first CS team who turned down invitations because their schedule became too tight. And all of this caused a lot of stress, which accumulated in Device's body and made itself felt in later years down the road. The start of the lockdown also caused a lot of problems. Astralis, like any other Tier 1 team, was used to the constant change of environment, and then, all of a sudden, they were locked up in one room together. And while young lineups like Spirit or Gambit were able to flourish in these conditions, the experienced Danes, on the contrary, had a lot of trouble adapting. Xyp9x and Glaive even went to the doctors and received notes about burnout, so that the management would allow them to rest for several months. But for Device, this situation was aggravated by another factor. While all the Astralis players were at the organization's headquarters in Denmark, he lived in Sweden, where he moved for the sake of his beloved girlfriend. He found himself isolated from the rest of his team, which he had gotten accustomed to working with in person. Astralis barely managed to get through the few months when Xyp9x and Glaive were on break. Unsurprisingly, their results were dismal during that period, but as soon as the duo returned, things began to improve. The Danes flourished so quickly that the community was even talking about how they could maybe bring back their era. The guys won 2 tournaments and entered 2021 as the best team in the world. And Device took 3rd place in HLTV's rating. Here's what Thorin said about him. That's what makes Device such a brilliant player. Not outstanding highlights, but stability. He's the person who is able to pull himself together in difficult moments, and his teammates will catch up. From the outside, it looked as though Astralis were doing great. Yes, of course, people knew that they had their difficulties that needed to be solved in order to achieve a new era. For example, Xyp9x and Glaive's individual stats were declining. But despite this, the Danes were still one of the strongest teams in the world, and Device undoubtedly was their main star. By By the way, at the time, he was still the record holder for the most MVP medals. Nowadays, it's held by Simple. The Astralis management won't soon forget that spring day when Device approached them with the news that his health had become too fragile, making it difficult for him to constantly fly to Copenhagen for training. He requested to be benched and sold to a Swedish organization, NIP for example. And be aware that at that time, it was only the name that remained from the legendary tag of Ninjas in Pajamas. The club had changed its owner, and all the experienced star players had long since left there. Now it was just a roster of young Swedes signed forward-looking. The team's average age was lower than 22, and out of all the players, only Rez had previously won a big tournament. In terms of rating, they were around mid-level. To some, they were still a Tier 1 team, but others considered them to be Tier 2. The Ninjas were now an ordinary and unremarkable team. So imagine the shock of the organization's owner when Astralis came to them, a team that couldn't even establish itself in the top 15, and asked, "Hey, would you like to buy Device from us?" Of course, the Ninjas immediately agreed and signed Nicolai. According to rumors, they paid about $1 million for a 3-year contract. When the players were told that their new teammate would be Device, they couldn't believe it at first. It sounded too good to be true. And then when the management told them that no, it's not a joke, Nock, who Nicolai was to replace, accepted the fact that he was out of the team and didn't even get upset about it. And the community was obviously in complete shock. No one could understand why Device left, and not even to an equal team, like replacing Brokey from FaZe, for example. NIP was an obvious demotion. Even in the Swedish scene, NIP were inferior to Fnatic,
who had Crims, Brolin, and Golden,
and the team's sniper JW, who was starting to decline. Device explained his choice by saying that he would have been happy to stay in Astralis, but his health just didn't allow him to fly to Copenhagen so often. He didn't want to move out of Stockholm, where he lived with his girlfriend, and therefore he decided it would be better to join a Swedish organization. And Nicolai chose NIP because of their performance culture, whatever that means. The ambitions of the new team were huge. Device even publicly said that Astralis achieved their success mainly because they were lucky to get into the meta, and in terms of management, he liked NIP way more. Later, Nicolai attempted to take back these words, but it was clear from his attitude that he really believed in this new project, so much so that he inadvertently insulted his previous team. NIP's main goal was to win the major in Stockholm, and it's hard to understand what exactly went wrong, but the results turned out to be much worse than Device expected. NIP often lost to Tier 2 teams, couldn't show good results on big tournaments, and went through many roster changes. Their peak was winning RMR in Stockholm with a prize pool of $100,000, where Device got MVP. And then, at the end of 2021, Device's life started falling apart. To understand how, let's go back to the 3 main reasons why he left Astralis and joined NIP. Firstly, he had faith in the new lineup and respect for the organization. Secondly, he wanted to live in Stockholm with his beloved girlfriend. And last but not least, he needed to take care of his health. Well, if the first reason regarding the team and the results turned out to be a complete disappointment, did he at least succeed in the other 2 reasons? Unfortunately not. He and his girlfriend had broken up, and so he was alone, and his health had deteriorated so much that at the end of the year, his body malfunctioned. During the IEM winter in December, Device realized that because of all of his stress, sleepless nights, and panic attacks, he felt completely disconnected from his body. He laid in bed, thinking about the future, and realized that he just didn't have the strength to continue playing. But surprisingly, at the end of 2021, Device was still named the 11th best player in the world. Crazy considering that his new team was a lot weaker than Astralis, and due to panic attacks, he could have multiple sleepless nights in a row. In such circumstances, it would be a feat just to manage a positive rating, but Device was still able to become the 11th best of the year. Look at the graph from that article. HLTV only added 4 tournaments to the Notable Tournaments tab, because the Swedes had nothing to show. So back then, Device made a small miracle happen. But at what cost? Now he really had no choice except to take a break for his health and well-being. It's important to understand that if a player like Device wants to take a break, that's completely normal. Such breaks usually usually last 1 or 2 months. Zeus, for example, was kicked on August 4th, and he went to some islands for a vacation. Then, on October 10th, he joined back up with Gambit. But when a Tier 1 player's break lasts more than a couple of months, it starts to raise some questions. Not everyone can get back to the shape they were at before their time off. Look at Xyp9x, for example. He left Astralis for 4.5 months and even won 2 tournaments with them after his return. But in the individual aspect, he just wasn't able to get back to his previous levels of performance. And Device went MIA for a long time. Later, he would share that he wanted to return way earlier, but his therapist convinced him to change his mind. He needed to learn how to enjoy CS again and not just get super stressed anytime a tournament came up. Otherwise, his health would suffer again for sure. During his break, Nicolai worked a lot with his therapist and was focused on his health, and also spent a lot of time with his family and close friends. He admitted that over the years of playing CS, he got so used to being Device that he lost his connection with his normal self, and he had to rekindle that relationship. In the summer of 2022, he was seen playing FPL. At the moment, he didn't have any plans, but was just playing for fun.
And so, after a year of inactivity, Device was invited back to Astralis.
This incident caused a lot of doubts in the community because players don't typically return from such long breaks, especially at Device's age, who was 27. But from the other side, Astralis itself was going through some very rough times, and they had no problem giving Device a chance. As a last resort, if it turned out that he had indeed lost his skills, they could advertise the return of a legend and then bench him. NIP, by the way, got about $600,000 for the sale of Nicolai. And so, in December 2022, Device played his first match back with Astralis.
And on the very first map, he got 32 kills.
And so, it was immediately clear that the year of inactivity didn't affect him even a little. Mr. Stability had returned once again to his throne. If we look at the stats from EPL Season 17 and the Blast RMR, we'll see that Device finished 17 out of 19 maps with a positive rating, which really is quite impressive. The problem, however, came from where Nicolai would least expect it. The lineup that Astralis had built around him was showing terrible results. The Danes failed in the major qualifiers and were forced to say goodbye to Glaive and Xyp9x. As Device said, that news knocked them out for several weeks. As the lineup grew younger, Device's interactions with his teammates became increasingly prominent. Nicolai unintentionally stepped into a mentor role, offering encouragement before important matches, and even overseeing details like their nutrition and sleep schedules. While he found some satisfaction in this new role, it didn't really translate into better results. Although Device's stats improved steadily each month, and he felt like he was in peak form, the constant changes within the team made it seem like a roller coaster from an outsider's perspective. And this is where things stood in the end. Device left Astralis to join NIP, hoping to build his relationship with his girlfriend and improve his health, and unfortunately he fell short in all the reasons for leaving. He still struggled with panic attacks and insomnia, but miraculously still managed to be ranked the 11th best player of the year. Then he took a break that extended into a full year long. His return to Astralis brought a glimmer of hope, but his rough patch was far from over. His teammates had poor stats, the management made controversial decisions, and the organization became embroiled in a scandal where thousands of people bombarded them with rat emojis. Meanwhile, despite all the myriad of difficulties and challenges, Device once again took 11th place in HLTV ratings. What is this, if not the best comeback of 2022? Yes, nowadays, Astralis' results are unstable, and they can't really be called a successful Tier 1 team. The lineup has gotten even younger, but the guys are getting better, and that's the most important thing. Hey guys, if you like our content, please subscribe to our channel. We really want to reach 10,000 subscribers. And please let us know in the comments which European player we should make a video about next time. That's it for now, guys. See you again soon.